All right, what's up, YouTube? Back again with another video. Hope everyone's doing well, making gains, in whatever way gains come to you. Hopefully you're growing. So in this video, I'm going to talk about emotionality and how actually when you're retaining, it can lead you to a very emotional state because of the excess energy and you not understanding what to do. So this happened to me the first long streak that I went that was like more than 3 months. I got to a place where I would experience emotions so intensely and so strongly that sometimes I wanted to lash out to other people because they could not understand and they couldn't comprehend the depth of the emotion that I was feeling. And, you know, I'm a man, so it was aggression. I wanted to fight people because there were times where I would be saying things and people couldn't understand and I couldn't get the point across to them correctly. And so it was things that were important to me. They mattered to me. And when other people didn't understand them, I was like, you're just not awake and you don't actually you can't see the negativity in what your pattern of thinking, right? And it would lead me to wanting to emotionally lash out on these people. Now, I wouldn't do it, but I had these extremely intense emotions within myself that weren't really good for me, and I started living through this emotional state, and I came to a place of a subtle aggression and anger all the time. I had a girl tell me once, it was like an inside joke. She said, you have a level of aggression that can be felt from here to the bushes. And the bushes we were looking at were about 30 feet away. And she said that, and I knew, I was like, that's spot on. Because I could tell by the way that people would look at me, it would be up to 30 feet away. People would turn and look at me. And I knew that they could tell that I was very aggressive. And I had this sharp, sharp edge to me, right? So there's a time and a place for that. But the overarching point is the emotionality. And so what happens is you have this increase of energy. And you also have, simultaneously with the increase of energy, there are emotions that you have likely been avoiding with porn, with sexuality. You've been avoiding certain emotions within yourself, right? So these two things together make a bad recipe. They make a domino effect or a snowball in the wrong direction, right? So you have emotions that you've been avoiding. You take away the thing that you use to avoid the emotions. Now the emotions start to rise and bubble up to the surface. And you have excess energy, which is going to, it's like putting wind in the fire of the emotions, right? And so that excess energy just really intensifies the emotions. And this is something that some of y'all might be able to relate to. You know, let me know in the comments if you've experienced this and if this video has been valuable so far, because this was something that I experienced and it just kind of hit me recently, right? So the thing that you won't realize is you'll have these intense emotions, these extreme emotions that are very deeply felt, right? But the thing that you miss is that you're kind of living through those emotions all the time. And your mind is actually kind of stuck into those emotions and you're feeling your way through life instead of thinking your way through life, which as a man, you're not supposed to do. I know that, you know, in the modern world, we've been taught as men to feel and be gentle and be more emotional and all this and that and this and that and this and that. I'm of the thought process that 50% of the world's population is female, 50% is male. Men are more logical and rational, women are more emotional. So leave the emotions to the women, and women leave the logic to men. We all know this, right? They do a very good job at it. But then we're told by men and women that we need to also partake in the emotions with women. right? So women don't need to partake in logic. They reject logic and they want all emotionality. Men need to partake in both sides. I'm not really of that camp. I say be more logical. Stick to the logic, stick to the rationale instead of the emotion, right? So you will start subtly living through your emotions. So you'll wake up in the morning, right? This is how it plays out. You wake up in the morning and you didn't sleep real well. So you don't feel very energized. And now because you don't feel energized, you stay in a low energetic state for the rest of the day based off of how you feel. And so then in a couple hours after you eat a little bit of food and you wake up or you drink some coffee, you feel energized and now you're awake and you're talking to everyone and you're happy. Then you start to crash a little later in the day, early afternoon, something like that. You start to crash a little bit. Now you feel bad again. Now you're low energy again. Instead of thinking your way through this, where you wake up in the morning and you acknowledge, I'm a little tired. Okay, cool. So what's next? What do I do? Take a shower. All right, take a shower, right? And you think your way through life instead of feeling your way through life, right? So this will play out like if you take cold showers every morning and you woke up and you're having a bad day, so you don't take a cold shower because you don't feel like it, right? Instead of where, despite you having a bad day, if you think your way through life, you would say, well, this is the most important time for me to take a cold shower, actually, is when I'm having a bad day instead of when I'm having a good day, right? So that's logic instead of emotion. And I think we have a lot of men in general that have had their minds kind of hijacked with this idea of be emotional, be empathetic, be compassionate to other people, when that's really not our place. I played this out with a friend. He was talking to me about empathy. I told him, every time someone says empathy, they want empathy extended to themselves, but they don't extend it to other people. They're asking to receive empathy every time they talk about it, right? They'll tell you, people need to give it and stuff, and they'll act as if they are giving it, but they're really asking for it. And so we went into a Starbucks, and I asked the lady there, I told him I was going to do this, is empathy a more feminine or masculine trait? Who tends to have more empathy? And she was, of course, Starbucks girl. She said, well, both can have it, but it does tend to be more of a feminine trait. And I told him that, and I was telling him, I'll leave the empathy to the women. I'll be logical. They can feel bad emotionally for someone and what they're going through. I'm going to look at what they're going through from a logical perspective and not feel, right? And a lot of this has come about because you can manipulate emotional people. If you're a logical man, you know this, that it's extremely easy to manipulate women in any way, shape, or form. It could just be for a joke, but you can kind of lead her down a path and crack a funny joke on her because she's so emotionally driven. It's very easy to do that, right? So as men, we've been pushed more towards the emotional side of life in order for us to be manipulated now because we're living out through how we feel. And I see it all the time. I walk around the world. I exist around other people. I see it in my brother as well. Sometimes he's not having a good day. He's feeling bad. And I realize, this is just feeling. You're subtly just feeling that you have a bad day instead of thinking, am I having a bad day? Or do I just feel like I'm having a bad day? Realistically, is today a normal day that's gone just like every other day? I just feel bad? Or has some calamity and tragedy happened that has caused this feeling, right? And usually you realize that you started with feeling instead of ending with feeling. Usually it's a normal day and you just feel bad throughout the day. So I've spelled all that out to you. I've told you how when you're retaining, you have emotions coming to the surface that you likely were avoiding in the past, and you have an excess of energy as well, pushing those emotions to the top, right? So you understand the concept I'm pitching here. So from here, what do you do? Well, of course, you lean towards your thinking. Naturally, you lean towards your thinking instead of your feeling. And you understand logic and rationale instead of feeling. And so even sometimes when you speak to someone, they could be in an emotional state when they're speaking, and you might join in with the emotion and start becoming more expressive and emotional when you should, depending on the conversation, approach from a logical perspective. Because even if you're having like a silly conversation with someone, if you approach instead of from emotion and you approach from logic, you'll crack a funny joke because you're thinking the whole time. Your brain is turning and you're being creative with that, right? So a good way, a big lesson I learned years ago through meditating was in the guided meditation, the guy would say, notice how the mind feels. Notice, right? Notice how the mind feels. Approach it with curiosity. Curious of how does the mind feel? Or, not how does the mind feel? Notice how your body feels, and then notice where your mind is at as well, right? And so in doing that from a curious perspective, and this doesn't take long, this could take 60 seconds in the morning where you just check in with yourself. One thing I began to notice is I would have all these emotions that I was struggling with in my early 20s, things I had never really experienced. Every time I sat down and he said that, I noticed that I was always happier than I felt. I was always happier, I was always more positive, and I was in a better mood than I felt. My brain, my thoughts, my patterns were happier, but my emotions weren't. And so I began to separate those. And so that's the point is, take 60 seconds to check in with yourself here and there. Just close your eyes and check in. Notice how your body feels. And say, well, where is my mind at? And you might find that you're fine. And you just feel some type of way because of something going on, right? So I heard this described in biblical terms. So they said that Adam and Eve, right? Eve is the emotion, Adam is the logic. Eve influenced Adam to eat the fruit, but humans didn't gather the knowledge of good and evil until the logic made the decision. Once the logic made the decision, the consequences came. But the emotions had to go to the logic in order for the decision to be made and the consequences to come. So that's to say that your logic rules. Your logic rules over your emotions. Your emotions can say, I feel bad, I feel bad, I feel bad. If you engage logically with it, I feel bad, now you feel bad. Consequence. If your emotions say, I feel bad, and you say, no, I don't, and your emotions come back again and say, I feel bad because this will happen, and you say, no, I don't, I don't feel bad. That's the final decision, that's the consequence, right? So logic rules, emotion influences logic. And they were explaining it as in this is the inner workings of your mind, and that your emotions can influence your logic, but your logic has the final say. Your thinking has the final say. And I thought that was an amazing metaphorical way to look at it. So another story I heard was the story of Jesus walking on water, in that he was walking above the emotions, the waves of emotions. It was a storm. There was waves in the sea, waves of emotions, right? They were painting it as a big metaphor, and that he was walking above it. And the disciples were all feeling fear. So they were being thrown about by the emotions in the emotional waves. And Peter said, Jesus, tell me to come out to you and I'll come. And so Jesus said, come. And so Peter, not knowing what was going to happen, stepped out of the boat and began to walk on the water because he thought, he used his thinking to say, if you tell me to come, I'll come out there. I'll overcome my emotions if you tell me to. So he did. And Jesus, knowing how the mind worked, said, keep your eyes on me, because he knew that Peter was getting ready to look away. And so he said, keep your eyes on me. Peter didn't do that, right? Jesus said it right before Peter looked away, because he knew where the mind was going. He knew the time that the mind was going to start, or the emotions were going to start coming in. So Peter looked away. He looked at the sea. He felt fear because of the storm. He felt fear. And then he began to sink. And he sank into the emotions, which, in the literal sense of the story, would have killed him. He had to be saved by Jesus. So in the metaphorical sense, you could say that emotions are going to lead you to death as a male, right? And so Jesus, and I've got another point to make on that emotions leading to death. So Jesus saved Peter, pulled him out of the emotions, and said, "O you of little faith," something along these lines, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" So Peter felt fear, and then he started doubting in his mind that it was possible. So he felt emotion first, and then it went to logic of doubting that it was possible, and he began to sink. Right? And I thought that was a great explanation. Now, touching on the emotions leading to death. A very simple thing that I thought of as I was speaking here with that is nice guys and dating. Women say, be emotional, open up, express some emotions. My girlfriend from high school used to always say, it seems like you never have any emotions. You never show any emotion ever to me. And she was right. I didn't have any emotion. It's a good thing, right? It's how I should be. Things would happen in my childhood. I didn't grow up in the greatest environment, and things would happen, and I had learned throughout my childhood to turn off the emotions, to turn them off and think logically, because there was no benefit to me being emotional about it. Because when I was real young, I would cry. As I moved into my preteen and teenage years, really preteens, testosterone hit me, I stopped crying and I started thinking. And so she would ask me, how do you have no emotion about this, terrible thing that just happened? And I would say, I don't know. I just don't. Like, I can't explain it to you. And so the point is, as a man, if you've done this, you know where I'm headed here. You show emotion and the woman rejects you. Now you don't reproduce, aka death. Death of the genes. Death of your bloodline, right? Maybe you're just too emotional in general and you lash out on a man physically and he shoots you and kills you in the street. Emotions led you to death, right? Because you're not going to get the same grace as a woman that if this man has a gun and a woman attacks him, well, he can just throw her off and throw her on the ground, right? But if you as a man attack him, you could kill him. So he kills you, right? So in that metaphor, that emotions could lead to death for a man, right? For women, I don't know. Again, the logic rules over the emotions, but the emotions influence the logic. And I think that's how men and women tend to work, and they tend to work best that way. That's how my parents were in our house, that my mom could say what she wanted to say, but the final decision was always with my father. And she accepted that, and she was okay with that because he would make the best final decision, right? And she learned that throughout time, that he made better decisions than her. which is a common thing. We all kind of know that women are very bad at making decisions. You know, we took women and we freed them up, and you'll hear from girls, what, women can't make their own decisions? And it's like, well, they can, but should they? Do they make good decisions? Well, let's look at the divorce rates. Let's look at how many are initiated by women. So they're not very good at picking partners. Let's look at the ones before they get divorced that are very angry and spiteful and hate men because they picked bad partners. Used to, the father and the brother had to approve of the partner. Now we've done away with that. The women are free to make their own decisions, and they're making terrible decisions. Why? Because they're emotional. Emotion will lead to death. You have to have logic to confirm everything. The logic confirms everything. Is this true? Emotion will say, I feel this way, I think this and that and this and that and this and that. What do you think? And the logic will say, da 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 da, true. Da 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 da, false. And that's the end of it. Right? So, if you're retaining, if you're on a streak, don't let yourself move into this emotional state. The emotions are going to make you relapse as well, because logically, you told yourself, I'm going to go X amount of time. Logically, you said, I'm not going to relapse. Logically, you don't want to do it for X, Y, Z reasons, but then you do it, and you find yourself on the other end of it. How did I end up here? Right? You were emotional. You got emotional, and you lost track of your thinking, and you lost track of your rationale and your ability to think into the future. And you thought of right now only. But that's because you were feeling. You felt right now. You never thought about your future. And so you ended up relapsing. So use your mind to control, not to control your emotions, right? Jesus didn't stop the sea. He didn't stop the storm. Use your mind to walk above your emotions, right? So yeah, that's it, fellas. Hope y'all enjoyed this video. Like, comment, subscribe, share with a friend. Have a great day.